We begin this episode by acknowledging the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which we record and share these stories. We pay our deepest respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all First Nations peoples listening or watching today's episode. We honour those who walked before us, their enduring connection to country, and the stories held in land, sky, and spirit. May we listen with openness and learn with humility. We acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Welcome to Beyond the Veil Australia podcast, where history, mystery, and the unexplained collide. From eerie encounters to forgotten histories, from channeled messages to scientific perspectives, we explore phenomena that defy easy explanation. I'm Heather, your guide through the shadows and the host of Beyond the Veil Australia podcast. Together, we'll unravel paranormal events, curious connections, and the questions that refuse to stay quiet. So whether you're a skeptic, a seeker, or somewhere in between, this space is for you. Welcome. Last season, we lifted the veil, but this time we step through. So, the passage is open. What waits beyond is now calling your name. Hello and welcome to part 2 of Cryptid Mania, the Guardians and Glitches. Thank you all again so much for joining me. I hope that you really enjoyed the first episode where we got to touch on a couple of different cryptid creatures, and we kind of got to explore a little bit of their stories and their sightings. So I hope that you're ready to explore episode 2, because we do have another 3 creepy cryptids that we are going to do a deep dive into. First of all, I want to give a shout out to everybody that's viewing or listening. Thank you so much. It truly means the world to me. Again, if you're, really enjoying the episode or you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review and a comment. It really helps the podcast get boosted, and it also helps it get found by other paranormally curious minds, just like you and I. So, buckle up and get ready for Cryptids 2 today. Let's get started. Some creatures don't chase us. They don't roar. They don't bleed. They just wait. In sacred waterholes, in pixelated silence, in the trees above the church, one guards the land that we forgot to honour. One walks like a ghost through digital static, and one watches from the branches just before something ends. These are not monsters, they are anomalies, glitches in the veil, guardians of the thresholds. In this episode, we follow 3 paths. One into the dreaming, where the Bunyip mourns what was taken. One into the backyard, where a Nightcrawler walks without sound. And one into the forest churchyard, where Owlman waits, silent, feathered, and knowing. These are the ones who don't belong, but they remember. And sometimes they remind us. Okay, so sounds kind of fascinating to explore. The first creepy cryptid that we are going to look into today is the Bunyip. Now, the Bunyip is a First Peoples or First Australians creature that lives in and around waterholes. So this one is about the Bunyip in Australia. I'm really keen to get into this one. It doesn't chase. It doesn't roar. It waits. In waterholes older than memory. In silence deeper than sound. And when it cries, it's not rage. It's mourning. Long before settlers arrived, long before maps were drawn, the Bunyip was known. Across southeastern Australia, Aboriginal nations spoke of a creature that lived in billabongs, swamps, and riverbeds. It was feared, but not hated, respected. Its presence marked sacred places, places where the land breathed. Descriptions varied. Some said it was serpent-like, others amphibious, with tusks or flippers. But the essence was the same. It was a guardian, a warning, a reminder. The Bunyip is not a monster, said Uncle Max Dulamun Harrison, a UN elder. It's a protector. It keeps the balance. It watches the water. In the 1800s, European settlers began recording Bunyip stories, but they misunderstood them. They described it as a terrible beast, a water devil, something to be hunted or feared. Newspapers printed sensational accounts. A skull found near Murrumbidgee River, a scream heard in the night, a creature seen dragging cattle into the swamp. But these stories stripped the Bunyip of its sacred role. They turned it into a cryptid, a curiosity, and erased the cultural context. Colonial accounts didn't just misrepresent the Bunyip, writes Dr. Deborah Bird Rose. They severed it from country, from meaning, from memory. Modern scholars and Indigenous knowledge holders offer deeper interpretations. The Bunyip as a symbol of ecological guardianship, so warning against trespass, pollution, and disrespect. Stories passed through generations encode environmental wisdom, where not to swim and where to tread lightly. The distortion of the Bunyip reflects broader patterns of cultural erasure and spiritual disconnection. Waterholes are thresholds, between worlds, between life and death. The Bunyip guards these crossings. The Bunyip scream, says Wiradjuri artist Lynette Riley, is the land crying out. It's not a threat, it's grief. In 1845, near Lake Bathurst, a settler claimed to hear a scream, high, mournful, echoing across the water. He said it sounded like a woman drowning. But the elders said it was the Bunyip, warning the land, warning the living. He never went near that lake again. The Bunyip is not a cryptid. It's a story with roots deeper than colonisation. It's a guardian of country, of water, of memory, of balance. And maybe its scream isn't meant to scare us. Maybe it's meant to wake us. Some creatures don't chase, writes poet Ali Cobby Eckerman. They wait. And when they cry, it's because we've forgotten. It lives in sacred waters. It screams like the damned. But it's not rage. It's remembrance. The Bunyip doesn't belong to our world, but it remembers it. And maybe it's waiting for us to remember too. Wow, that was a pretty cool deep dive and explanation into the Bunyip. And I really like that, we got to hear some of these accounts and different stories, but I also really like that we've been able to really look at it and understand it from the First Peoples perspective and actually be able to sort of honor that in being able to share that. I think that's really cool. So yes, I did say creepy cryptids at the start, but yes, I did forget that there was a little bit of change in that one. So yes, I guess the Bunyip technically, when you look at it on the surface, as most people know, is cryptid, but it really does, again, it highlights that more spiritual paranormal side rather than it being an actual biological being. So yeah, kind of interesting. Again, it's another one of those things, isn't it? Like where we sort of touched on in the last episode where we were kind of trying to figure out, is it biological? Is it paranormal? Is it both? Is it none of the above? So I think definitely the Bunyip has demonstrated that it's more of a spiritual or paranormal experience rather than a biological creature. So yeah, really, really interesting. And it's I remember really funny. Well, it's sort of funny. It's only funny because I was probably about 10. But when, oh God, yeah, it was probably when I was about 10 years old. We'd gone on, now I can't actually remember whether this was like an excursion or field trip or whether it was like a camp. I just can't quite remember. But I remember we'd gone out on this river and we were all on like this little boat, those like touristy boats that, like the one that I can think of is like when in The Hangover, when they're in the second one where they're on this boat thing and they're going through the harbour to go and get something to eat or whatever. And it's kind of like a big wide boat and it has like, the like canvas roof over the top. So it's kind of like a sightseeing tourist boat type thing. So that was the kind of boat that we were on. I don't know, it was like a full class of like 10-year-olds. And I remember we were being told this story about the Bunyip. And anyway, we'd sort of like moved our way along the river. We'd got all these kind of creepy stories. I can't remember them off the top of my head because we're going back like a long time. And I remember this tour guide was like, I think we can see something in the water. Like, let's move over to look over the edge of this boat. And like all of us had sort of gone over to the edge. None of us fell in, just as an FYI, but we're all kind of standing there. And then next minute, these horrendous bubbles in this one spot were just bubbling up in this river, and everybody was just so shocked, and there's kids screaming and they're moving back and whatever. And yeah, and like now that I think about it, I was like, oh, the cheeky fucks, they obviously had piping and that there, and they're telling the spooky story about the Bunyip. And because I live in southeastern Victoria, so it's part of the lands where I live, that's its sort of area. So I thought, you cheeky fucks. So they've done this. And, obviously as I've gotten older, I'm like, oh my God, yes, that's right. I remember. And I vaguely remember them kind of, trying to put on this bit of a theatrical thing, like after everyone was screaming, like, quick, 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 get us out of here, get us out of here. But, part of me as a 10-year-old, they're trying to really like get something happening. But, as an adult, I kind of think about it and I was like, you know what? I actually really love it. They're wanting to tell like a kind of creepy, cool story, and, kids love all those sorts of things, but to actually have it set up in this little tour that you're doing, that you can actually have something like that to, get people really questioning, does it exist? But I definitely believe that it's probably something that, yeah, it's connected to the land. It's about trying to care for the land. So yes, I believe something paranormal like that as an elemental potentially definitely exists. But yeah, to think about that now as an adult and go, how on earth would a Bunyip have just known to blow bubbles at that point in time? Like it was just one of those little funny things. So yeah, that was a funny little story that I remembered when I was sort of doing a little bit of research on this. And I was like, oh God, I wish I had just a bit more clearer memory on exactly whether it was like a school camp or it was like an excursion. I just can't remember, but I really wish I could. But it is, I was 10 at the time. So, I'm now 34. My memory's not going to be that great sometimes. So, fun little, interesting kind of creepy story about the Bunyip, but also kind of getting that slightly cheeky side where you can kind of see where an experience as a 10-year-old kind of, every time from then on, every time I'd hear the name Bunyip, I would just be like, oh, and I'd see the bubbles. And, until I got older and sort of started to understand a bit more, I was not quite as afraid. But yeah, it's really interesting. And it's funny because probably about 30 minutes from where I live, there is actually a town called Bunyip. And, sometimes for work, I've got to go out, an hour and a half sort of in that same direction for work. And yeah, it's funny every time we're driving down and I see the name Bunyip, it's one of the first things that comes to my mind is that experience as a kid. But yeah, it's really interesting. So just thought I'd throw that out there. Not only do I have a town nearby that's called Bunyip, I had a little Bunyip experience as a child that was probably a bit cheeky by the tour guides, but also being able to explore a little bit more of the truth around this particular entity has been kind of nice as well. So, yeah, fun little facts for you. But without further ado, I would like to present to you our next creepy cryptid on the list for today. This one is the Fresno Nightcrawler, the walking absence. It doesn't speak. It doesn't chase. It walks slowly, silently through backyards and pixels. And when it's gone, it leaves nothing but questions. The footage. Fresno, California, 1997. A man named Jose was reviewing security footage from his backyard when he saw what made him freeze. Two pale, leg-like figures walked across the lawn. No arms, no torso, just legs. Long, thin, and gliding. They moved slowly, deliberately, like they didn't belong to gravity. I didn't see it with my eyes, Jose said, only on the tape, but I felt it, like something had just passed through. The footage was grainy, low resolution, but unmistakable. And then it happened again. In 2007, another video surfaced, this time in Yosemite. Same figures, same walk, same silence. The internet took notice, and the Nightcrawler was born. Unlike most cryptids, the Nightcrawler didn't emerge from oral tradition or ancient lore. It came from pixels, from surveillance, from the quiet places where technology watches, and sometimes it sees too much. The footage spread across YouTube, Reddit, and paranormal forums. People debated its authenticity. Was it a puppet, a hoax, or a glitch? But others saw something deeper. It's not just the shape, said cryptid researcher Dana Newkirk. It's the feeling, like it's not supposed to be there. Like it's walking through our world, but not in it. Scholars and folklorists began to study the Nightcrawler as a new kind of myth, born not from campfires, but from compression artifacts and digital silence. The brain's tendency to find patterns, especially in faces and figures, in the ambiguous stimuli, The Nightcrawler's minimalism made it uncanny. The stories that spread through online communities shaped by virality and visual ambiguity. The idea that constant observation creates new mythologies, creatures seen only by machines, the discomfort we feel when something is almost human but not quite. The Nightcrawler is the ghost of the digital age, writes folklorist Trevor J. Blank. It's not a monster, it's a question. Jose rewound the tape, played it again. Two pale shapes, walking, slowly, with no arms, no face, just legs, just motion. He felt his chest tighten, not from fear, from recognition, like something had just passed through and had left the world slightly off. He never saw it again, but the tape still plays and the silence still hums. The Fresno Nightcrawler doesn't roar, it doesn't chase, and it doesn't bleed. It walks. And maybe that's why it lingers. It's not a threat, it's a presence. Almost as if it's a reminder that not everything in our world is of our world. That sometimes the things we see in the corner of the frame are the ones that matter most. It's not what it is, said one viewer. It's what it makes you feel, like reality just glitched. No arms, no face, just legs and silence. Just a glitch in the veil. The Nightcrawler doesn't belong here, but it walks here. And maybe that's just the point. Wow. Yeah, I was looking forward to looking over the Nightcrawler one again. Some of this footage I actually have seen. I don't know if I've seen Jose's footage, but I've certainly seen the one at Yosemite, and it was like 3 of them. They were just kind of like, kind of almost in a triangular pattern, just kind of moving down like through this foresty type thing. Like it was just crazy. And I remember looking at these creatures and just being like, what is that? And one thing that I noted when I looked at footage like this was that it looks like a pair of like clown pants that are in stilts. Like, when you see a clown that's on stilts and he's walking around, it's literally like if someone was just to remove his whole top half, it would be just like the hips and the legs on the stilts. That's what these Nightcrawlers look like. And yeah, they move it's weird. It's not like each leg sort of moves on its own from the hip. It's like it has to sort of like go sort of lift from one side, and it's that I don't know if I'd call it maybe like a waddle almost, where it can't, as a human, when we walk with our legs, we can feel that it's moving from the hip, but our hip is stationary. But it's like they can't do that. So it's like they sort of balance on one side and pull one leg forward, and then do the same kind of counterbalance on the other one and pull it sort of up and around. Like it's almost like it's doing like a circular motion from where it's standing to sort of get the leg in front of it. So, but it's strange because it's very slow. It's not fast paced. So it takes a while when you've sort of watched that footage a few times and you're sort of watching how this thing is moving, and you're like, that's just strange. And again, I can't say I've paid enough attention to how somebody would walk on stilts. Is that what they have to do because they've got this extension where they actually have to sort of lift the hip up and swing the leg around? Like, is that something that people have to do on stilts? I don't actually know the answer to that question, and I'm curious about it now. But that was sort of what it reminded me of when I've seen these beings, is like, it just looks like a pair of legs on stilts just walking or waddling, and there's no it's almost like, yeah, that's not like aware of anything outside of what it's doing. It's like it's just minding its business, going about its whatever, its routine of some description, but it's almost like it doesn't know that you're there. And yeah, it's just the way that they move. That's sort of what I've seen. It doesn't move with a specific purpose to get from point A to point B. It's just moving through. And so I also wonder with the Nightcrawlers, is it, we've talked about briefly in the third episode of Tools of the Trade where we were kind of looking at consciousness and things like that. And sometimes I wonder with some of these cryptids in the way that they move, are they kind of just crossing a particular part of a different dimension? Like, is there some kind of, I don't want to call it like glitch in the matrix, but like, is there like a little tear between the two dimensions of the veil and it sort of like just passes through and then keeps on going? And because of the way that in this footage that I'd seen that the way it was moving, it was just like, I had no idea about what was going on, where it even was. It was just moving through. So I just wonder if it's something like that. Is there some kind of moment where you just have a thin piece of veil and it's just like, cool, we walk through, oh shit, we're in the wrong dimension, let's just keep on going, and then you pass through again? I don't know. Cryptids are not my strong point of knowledge, but I certainly enjoy learning about them and kind of seeing different footage because I find it really fascinating. But yeah, I don't know. Anybody out there that's got a pretty in-depth knowledge of cryptids or has some answers to some of these questions, please let me know because I'm really curious to learn more. But yeah, kind of cool and creepy at the same time. I don't know. Not quite sure what it could be, but there is a lot of arguments about cryptids being interdimensional beings. Again, it comes back to that question of, is it paranormal or is it biological or is it both? The Bunyip is definitely more of that paranormal thing. The Nightcrawler definitely seems more paranormal, but is it, not to say that it's not biological, but maybe it's like the interdimensional side of it. I'm not sure. Curious to sort of find out, because from what we can see is that they're not deliberately going to harm anybody. They're just kind of putting out their warnings and just going about their business, just moving through. I don't know. It's one that's got me stumped, to be honest, with cryptids. It's just something that, yeah, I feel like I go round in circles with questions. But anyway, we're going to move on because now we are going to look at our third and final creepy cryptid for today's episode. And again, this one I've come across a couple of times. Again, my knowledge isn't like super deep into it, but I have heard some of these stories or thoughts or beliefs on this particular cryptid before. So kind of curious to go a little bit deeper into it and, again, see what we uncover in this little episode. But this is the Owlman, the watcher in the trees. It doesn't fly away. It doesn't blink. It watches. From the branches above the church, from the edge of the forest, from the place where silence gathers. Mornin, Cornwall, 1976. Two young girls, June and Vicky Melling, were walking near the old church when they saw it. A tall, feathered figure perched in the trees. It had glowing red eyes, broad wings, and it didn't move. It was like it was carved from shadow, June said, but it was watching us. We felt it. They ran, but sightings continued. Over the next few years, more children reported seeing the same creature, always near the church, always in trees. Local newspapers dubbed it Owlman, but the name didn't capture the dread. Mourns Church is ancient, built on a hill surrounded by dense woods. The area is steeped in Celtic lore, a place of burial, ritual, and quiet reverence. The Owlman didn't appear in town, only near the church, only in the trees. It's not a cryptid, said Cornish folklorist Simon Young. It's sentinel, a watcher, something tied to the land and to death. Some believed it was a mutated owl, others a prank. But the witnesses, who were mostly children, described something that felt wrong. Not monstrous, just off, like it wasn't supposed to be seen. Owlman sits at the crossroads of myth, psychology, and spiritual archetype. Owls are tied to death, wisdom, and the underworld. They guide souls, and they guard thresholds. Churches, forests, and graveyards are said to be places where the veil thins, where the watchers wait. The watcher represents the part of us that sees the truth, even when we don't want to. Children are often more open to liminal perception, seeing what adults dismiss. The Owlman is not a threat, writes mythologist Liz Green. It's a mirror. It watches not to judge, but to reveal. June looked up. It was there, perched in the yew tree above the church. Wings folded, eyes glowing. It didn't move, but she felt it. It was like inside her thoughts, like it knew. She never went back to that church, but she still dreams of those eyes. Owlman doesn't chase, doesn't speak, but watches. And maybe that's the real horror, being seen by something that knows what's coming. It's not a monster, it's a presence, a reminder that some places are sacred, that some silences are not empty, and that some watchers are waiting. It's not the feathers, said one witness. It's the feeling, like it saw something in me and it didn't look away. Wow. Uber creepy. Again, the Owlman, he probably could have fitted more into part one with the Watchers, but I felt like with the similarities of the Bunyip and the Nightcrawler, with the fact that it was in sort of sacred places, and that it was more about kind of being a guardian of knowledge and where the veil thins and things, I was kind of like, I feel like it fits more into the guardian and glitches kind of section. So yeah, very interesting, but it does kind of tie us between episode 1 and episode 2. So again, yeah, I really have enjoyed looking at some of these creatures and cryptids, and finding out a little bit more about them, because as I said earlier, cryptology is not, is that even a word, cryptology, or is it cryptozoology? I don't know. Something. Cryptids are not my strong point of knowledge, but I have always enjoyed learning about them. And I think the reason why I've enjoyed learning is because I can see where there's intersections in other areas of the paranormal. So like we kind of talked about, is something a paranormal thing? Is it a biological thing? Is it both? Is it something else? And, there's those crossovers between something being like a Bigfoot that we can sort of see as more of a biological thing, And then you've got like the Nightcrawler, where it's like, well, is it more just that it's actually a paranormal thing, or are they interdimensional beings that can come and go from both planes as they please? I don't know. But I have found it really interesting just kind of seeing different things. And there's lots of people that will talk about, the Yowie or the Bigfoot or the Sasquatch, just to sort of name a few of where we all, different parts of the world, will relate to this figure. But, there's a lot of talk about the fact that he is just a suit for alien beings to sort of use to cross worlds. But then I have heard that, and I kind of think, oh, well, it's probably not completely far-fetched. But I also think that why would we be having sightings of things in the sky or in the water if that were true? Because they wouldn't need to do that. They'd just be able to freaking turn up as Bigfoot on Halloween, I don't know. There could be some more to it. I don't know. But those are the sort of things where I can kind of see where there might be opportunities for crossover, but sometimes it can, especially with cryptids, I think there's a lot more that they could be, and it's trying to be able to kind of work out, well, what are they and what capability have we got to actually tell us what they are. Yeah, really, really interesting. But once again, I just want to ask if cryptids are your strong point or an area that you've always really enjoyed doing deep dives into and you've got a bit of knowledge on them, let me know. Let me know what your thoughts are. What do you think, or what do you know about cryptids that might explain a bit more about what or who they are? Because I'm definitely curious, and I'm still trying to find a lot of information, but it does seem to be a lot of cool stories as well. And I mean, that was sort of where I wanted to go with that today, because I did find it a little bit difficult to find some sort of more scientific research. And that was why I thought, look, if we can keep some of that skeptical scientific viewpoint on it, awesome. But I really want to emphasize the stories, because they are really quite frightening at times. And especially if you're in an area and you're kind of like, well, hang on a minute, what the fuck have I just seen? It takes you back a little bit. So, yeah, I thought I'd try something a little bit newer with an area that I'm not as familiar with. So, yeah, hopefully you guys liked it. It's slightly different. I've not rambled as much today, so that's probably a bonus, because you've been able to just kind of hear the stories. But to close off episode 2 of Cryptid Mania, 3 creatures, one that mourns in sacred water, one that walks through static and silence, and one that watches from the trees just before the end. They didn't roar, they didn't chase, they waited. And maybe that's what makes them unforgettable. Guardians of memory, glitches in the veil. They remind me that not all mysteries are loud. Some whisper, some walk, some simply watch. But next time, the veil doesn't just whisper, it touched me. In the next episode, I step inside old Geelong Jail, a place where the walls remember, where photos appeared in my camera roll that I did not take, where the mist and orbs showed up in images that were clean when I captured them, where names whispered to me hours before arrival miraculously appeared on display boards inside, and where the only death mask that pulled me in to look was tied to one of those names. But that wasn't all. Something else was there. A spirit I've encountered before. One that spoke to me and to one of my guests in a moment that left us both shaken. It returned. And what it revealed changed everything. This isn't folklore. this is personal. So join me for Beyond the Bars, Old Geelong Jail, where the veil doesn't just watch, it responds. And sometimes it remembers me. So, in closing, stay grounded, stay curious, and always expect the unexpected. Stay tuned for the episode on Geelong Jail and the experiences that were had there. I can't wait to tell it all to you next week. So stay tuned, and I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. And of course, if you have enjoyed this episode, if you could please leave a review or a comment, that would be greatly appreciated. It helps this little podcast get seen and noticed by other paranormal, curious minds just like you and I. But for now, thanks for joining me, and I will catch you next week. Bye.